We really can't leave out the history.
The home of the first sit-in to desegregate a business, Wichita was highly segregated, both geographically and economically. African Americans and Hispanics, all but banned from high-paying jobs, earned on average about 2/3 what white Wichitans brought home.
Poverty robs people of their lives, and it's not that they choose to be in poverty.
The government helped make sure it stayed that way. Here's what we're talking about. This is a map showing areas the federal government didn't think were good home loan options. The areas in red, too poor and too full of African Americans, or bordering African American neighborhoods, sometimes referred to as redlining for the distinctive color coding on the map. That meant most of these homes remained cheap rentals, keeping the neighborhoods from improving. As first Hispanics and then Asians moved to town, they gravitated toward the neighborhoods they could afford.
There remains some misinformation about who occupies the Northeast community, and it is a very multicultural environment. It is not an African American community anymore.
The legacy of that segregation is still visible in these neighborhoods today. Take a look at these maps. This is the old redlining map, and this is the current racial breakdown in Wichita. The minorities, Hispanics, African Americans, and Asians, still squeezed into many of those same neighborhoods. What does all this have to do with obesity? Well, if we look at health outcomes attributed to obesity, like arthritis, diabetes, high cholesterol, and heart disease, again, the highest incidence, all in the same neighborhoods. And here's one last map. Those neighborhoods are desperately short of grocery stores. 44 square miles of food desert right in the middle of the city. There used to be one grocery store here at 13th and Oliver.
I thought it was booming, and they closed it down, and what's there now?
Leaving residents to shop at nearby convenience stores. Convenient, but more expensive.
Soda is cheaper than water.
And that has health consequences. According to the state of obesity's most recent data, more than 32% of Kansans are clinically obese, while nearly 37% of Latinos are, and more than 41% of African Americans.
In the lower income areas, the obesity rate is approximately 1.6 times greater than in those areas with moderate and higher income.
Poverty plays into the lack of profits that chase away full-sized grocery stores. That lack allows convenience stores to hike their prices and leaves residents with some tough choices.
If I'm looking at my budget and know that if I spend it on fruits and vegetables, I won't be able to pay my electric bill, I'm going to pay my electric bill.
It's pretty clear that it's expensive to be poor. People look down on folks for that.
Brandon Johnson grew up in one of these neighborhoods. He now sits on the Wichita City Council after years of activism designed to help his childhood neighbors. This dormant garden, one of his ongoing projects.
And they saw the opportunity for this to really start to change and uplift the community.
With this garden, residents learn how to grow their own. Once ripe, the vegetables grown here are available to anyone who needs them. Folks like Val Jean, who just moved in across the street. He walks to the nearest store more than a mile away.
Every other day, probably. Well, back in the days, we had Safeway, Carswell's. It would have been a lot easier to get the food what you need, instead of have to go to Kirchhoffstown or somewhere else. Bring back the Walmart.